This is a pleasure treasure hunt for glimmers of gendering joy. You can use as touchstones and anchors to take you back to a place of flow and gendering connection. You can use this to visit these sensations regularly so they become familiar. And it's that familiarity that can become something you reach for when you feel dysregulated, activated, misaligned, dysphoric, whether that object is around or not. It's a contemplative exercise. You're not trying to clear your mind. It's not that kind of mindfulness practice. I'm going to be asking you to stay present with what sensations you might notice. A felt sense might be described as having color, vibration, temperature, velocity, pressure or movement impulses. You may produce a story as a way of finding meaning. You may notice numbers, textures, imagery, words, a song, etc. Maybe you remember a memory, make up a fantasy, or notice an urge to move your body in some way. Maybe you notice numbness, or absence, darkness, or silence. It's all welcome. You're just being an observer. I would ask that you try not to change anything that you notice. So if it feels comfortable enough to stay with, that being said. So refrain from engaging with narration as it comes up. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say that I notice an image of a steel ball dangling on a chain, suspended from a lump in my throat, down to a sense of tension in my stomach. And I have some narration that comes up, a story. Oh, I wonder if that ball's there because XYZ. And this is the piece that we want to try and stop ourselves from going to this consideration or analyzation step. We want to halt that if we're able. Just stay with the data collection step of noticing. That is what this practice is for. So once you notice something, turn towards it and give it attention. And then stay in the observer mode and notice what comes up when you turn your attention towards the thing you first noticed. Again, don't engage, don't try to clarify, question, offer answers, or explain why. You're just gathering information, you're not assessing it. So to take that into example, the same example, let's say I turn and I'm looking more closely at the suspended steel. Okay, I notice this ball suspended. I turn towards it in my mind's eye and really look at the thing. And I notice that the ball, it seems really heavy, and the chain actually seems quite delicate in comparison. I notice a lot of tension in my stomach where the heavy ball is hanging. But there's nothing else around. It's just numbness around the ball. And when I tune into the numbness, I realize it's actually just that darkness again. And it's silent, and the darkness is still. So throughout this exercise, I'll offer different invitations for things you might choose to focus your attention on. You get to choose and follow just one of the invitations that draws your curiosity, and let go of the rest. You can come back to them next time you try the exercise. Maybe do a different one. But ideally, you might go through each, noticing that you have different and often drastically levels of access to different senses. We all do. So repeat this exercise again and again, especially with those senses where you have the least access. This will help you start to build up the practice of noticing these input points and building elasticity to have more awareness across your different senses. I want to note that I did this exercise for nearly a year, pretty diligently, working to expand my elasticity to access, and sometimes I felt like I was totally numb and had no access to anything, and sometimes I was utterly overwhelmed with what I noticed, and I had to take a step back from the practice, sometimes for weeks at a time. I was first able to access imagery that came to me much easier, And my imagery tends to look a lot like my dreamscapes. It took me a minute to recognize. So it did take me longer to start to notice physical sensations within my body and other things. And you're going to have a completely different ride. So give yourself the grace of spaciousness. Urgency has a high probability to interfere with this practice, so try to curb that if you're able. And I might suggest that you be protective of your process by striving to banish any sense of what you should feel or sense. And that's a tall order, I understand that. But when you notice the shoulds, oh, I'm not doing XYZ right. Says who? Certainly not me. And I'm giving you this exercise. So if you created that story, you get to banish it. So just focus on the practice of doing. That's all that matters, is the doing. So on this page, there is a list of just a few examples. I don't want to overwhelm you with a gigantic list. You can Google that, but just a few examples of some things you might notice or feel or sense, and you might not. So on we go to the exercise, the pleasure treasure hunt. We're going to start with considering an object that prompts you to have feelings or sensations of joy within your body. Something that maybe when you look at it, you're like, funness. That's a start. Joy can be a big word. Feel free to gradate that to lighter to heavier, wherever you might have access. Maybe this is an item that you have in your possession. Maybe you have a photo of it, or can recall a memory of it. Maybe you can conjure up a fantasy of an item. Maybe someone gave it to you as a gift. Perhaps you were holding it at a moment of joy. Maybe you saw this item on someone else and have never touched it. It could be that you imagine this item as part of the world you wish to see. So hold or think of your item that reminds you of or brings up joy. Doesn't matter if it's physically present or not. Imagination, fantasy, and reality are processed quite similarly in our brain, so just hold this in your mind's eye, if not your hands. And I invite you to settle in to yourself comfortably. Maybe sit down, lay down, movement if that feels good. Whatever helps you, just be and notice. And we're going to let the context, the meaning, the story of this item just sort of slip away and just leave it with the joy. Just be present with that feeling, no matter how faint. It may be very tiny. That's enough. And then moving our focus to the touch of this item in your hands or in your mind's eye, the detail of it. Following touch, pick up the item or imagine touching and holding it. What's the first thing you notice? Is it smooth or coarse? Explore it with your fingers. Maybe close your eyes to imagine the texture, the friction, the weight. What is the quality of the touch you give it? Do you touch it gently or with a lot of pressure? Do you prefer to run your fingers over one side more than the other? What else do you notice? How would you describe the qualities of these sensations to somebody else? How would you describe them using totally different words? Check in with your body. Do you have a tendency or desire or want to move towards these sensations? Or maybe you notice yourself moving away from them? And following more sensory input, as you explore, imagine exploring, scan through your body for a sense of openness. Notice the joy it brings for you. Where does the joy or pleasure live in your body? How would you describe this in words? What sensations are present in your body alongside this feeling? Is there a buzzing or vibration to it? Is there numbness or absence of sensation? How would you describe this absence to me? What are the details of the numbness? Is it expansive or intimate? How would you describe what you're feeling in the form of a sound? Would it be low in tone or quick-paced? A particular instrument or sounds from nature? What color would you offer as indicative of these sensations or this memory or this thought? Are there smells or sounds you might associate with these feelings or fantasies? Notice any softening, loosening, ringing, humming, pulling, tightening, rippling in your body. Is there bubbling in your chest or softening in your pelvic bowl? Check in with your jaw, your anus, your shoulders. Do they relax as you sink into the joy? Do you notice them turning inward or tightening? Turning towards any images that might show up. As you focus on the object, is there an image that crystallizes the essence of this joy that you might describe? Does it flash by or slowly reveal itself? How might you describe this feeling of joy or pleasure if it was a landscape or environment? Rugged and vast, or sultry and dense? Does a snapshot of a memory or a bit of media pop up for you? What do you notice when you peer closer and examine the details of the image? Are there other objects or beings that present themselves in your mind's eye? If your joy were a plant, planet, or water formation, what would it be? How would you showcase your joy with your body to somebody? What movement would you use to represent it in a mirror? What would the shape of your joy be if you were to draw an outline of it? As you close this exercise, maybe offer yourself a gesture of care or gratitude to yourself for beginning this practice. Maybe it's a smile, a movement or shape of your body, a wiggle of your butt. I invite you to breathe into the width and depth of your muscles, your fat, your bones. Open your eyes or lift your gaze and join me when you're ready to connect again. I want to reiterate that the first many times you do this practice, you may not feel much, or only have very faint sensations, or be overwhelmed and can't take that much. You may have a steady stream of input, lots to notice. You may not be sure whether or not you notice anything at all. Don't hesitate to step back. Mileage varies greatly for everybody. There's no correct place to be, but exactly where you are noticing. That is the purpose. I recommend you go through this exercise again and again as a practice, trying out different prompts at different times with different objects or fantasies or memories. Build up a practice of noticing what is present and what consistent associations you have to your joy. When you're out in the world and something brings you joy, take a mental snapshot in that moment so you can do this practice with it. You may notice that shift with time as you sink into, reach for, and come back to these specific noticings over time, that these associations strengthen or change. This exercise I took with a lot of gratitude and adjustment from the exercise Waking Up the Hands from Betty Martin, and there's a link in the resources for you. So I thought it might be helpful if I shared my gendering joy object. It is this hat. This is my gendering joy object that I first kind of built this practice around. And the reason is that I hold a lot of complexity in this. I used to put on hats in order to share intimacy after much of my harms and retractions from being able to connect with people. Putting on a hat felt safer. The more it held me, the better. And I got this in order to be able to be intimate with people again, both conversations and physically. And over time, it went from something I needed, felt I needed, helped me, supported my process in being able to connect with other people, to being something that I could just think about. You know, I could be in a situation, it is very warm, this thing. I could be in a situation with somebody where I knew I wanted to show up more vulnerably and was having a hard time doing it, and I would just think about having this hat because I didn't exactly carry it on me all the time. I would think about having this hat, and sometimes I would just kind of hold my head or stroke my head thinking about it, and that would be enough for me to remember the warmth of the hat and the weight of it and the pressure on my head when I kind of pull on the little strings, and the kind of warmth that I get in my belly when my head feels that warm, and the ways that my shoulders will soften. So I use this as a touchstone, an anchor of joy and safety. At first it was just safety, and over time it became joy because I knew that if I thought about this hat, I would be okay. So it helped me really learn how to rebuild intimacy and bonds with people without needing to touch it, without needing to have it near me, just the resource of knowing what those sensations were like in my body and being to tap back into those in times of need. So that is what this practice is about. And you can use it for a variety of things. I used the hat for safety more than anything. Over time, it turned into more joy because I started taking it to regular Sunday contact improv dances with me, and that brought me great joy in my body. And the hat got associated with that. So it started out with safety. That safety allowed me to show up in big places where there were men that wanted to touch me, contact movement dance. And I was building up a practice of saying no. And having the hat at first was really helpful to know, like, I'm safe. And later I didn't need the hat. I had built up the practice to, nope. So, yeah, that is my hope for you with this exercise, that you might find an anchor of joy, find something that brings you joy that you can practice with regularly and get in touch with, and just use the thought of, the memory of, the sensations that you can derive from it as a resource out in the world when you really need that support.